staff are very realistic that the country's going through a step change really in what it can afford. So I think there's people I've been impressed by the way people are taking a positive view of this, but of course they're worried. Their lifestyles are predicated on the fact that they're going to have certain terms and conditions, and if they feel that those could change, it's bound to be an unsettling time. Pensions, of course, is the big one really, and I think there will be change there. Where we are in Ealing, we've offered all staff the opportunity for voluntary redundancy for a start. We've offered all staff the opportunity to express an interest in shorter working weeks, 9-day fortnights, 4-day weeks, term time working, flexible working, partly to deal with the savings issue, but partly actually to pursue the agenda of more flexible working, because we actually think there may well be wins for both staff and the organisation in pursuing some of those options. I think one needs to be careful in terms of going too far to attack fundamental working conditions that will affect the relationship between the staff as a collective whole and the organisation and damage that emotional contract I talked about. I know some councils are doing that and it may be necessary, but I think it needs to be done with care. Certainly in my organisation, and I'm sure we're not alone in this, we're asking staff as well about their ideas for savings. And a minority, but some staff have come back to us and said we would take pay cuts in order to protect jobs and reduce job losses. Now, we're not proposing that or suggesting at the moment, but it's on the agenda and it's something we will continue to discuss with staff and trade unions. So my short answer is we should be doing everything and looking at every opportunity to be more flexible and adaptable in the way we organise our workforce in order to reduce job losses, in order to protect services to the public.
Well, I think it's an education process with staff. We've talked more about pay bill now, which is a combination of a range of things, what we pay our staff, but also what consultants we use, what temporary staff we use, what sort of things are in the pay bargain that may have indirect costs. So we've reviewed all of those. The most controversial thing for my staff was that we also help out with their travel costs. Lots of people in inner London travel fair distances, and I looked at that, it looked a bit expensive. I promised that I wouldn't alter that term and condition if we could reduce consultancy and temporary staff spend over the same period. They've exceeded my targets on that, so I'm very hopeful that I'll be able to keep my side of that bargain. So I think you've got to be in the debate with staff. Nobody likes having a worse deal. The other thing is to make the difference between value and price, so actually people still want to be valued even if you can't pay them quite as much as they'd like.
Well, I think the reality of it is that councils are facing some really tough cuts. We're talking perhaps 30% or more. We've got to look at all options of reducing, our costs. Terms and conditions will be something that local authorities are looking at. I think the staff are realistic about this. We need to look at more flexible models of working. I think we've got to ensure we engage properly with the staff to help them and support them through this process. But I think it's going to be important that we kind of work together. But the bottom line is we've got to get the costs down.
I think it's going to vary. In Hounslow, I've suggested to the unions that we look at this whole idea about rationing work. I live in the West Midlands, and during the industrial phase of the recession, a lot of companies did just that. They kept people on, offered them shorter hours, but guaranteed them work as soon as their order book picked up. And so they saved a lot of people going on the dole. The companies saved the costs of redundancy and then recruiting again and possible further retraining, thereby reduce, and if we do something like that in local government, it seems to me that we can reduce the impact on services as well, and in the end that has to be the driving force. We're there, of course we want to care for our employees and look after them, but our priority has to be looking after communities.
Well, I think that some council staff will oppose it on the basis that they feel that they're going to be one of the survivors. But I think there'll be a majority of people who would frankly rather protect jobs and protect the services that those jobs deliver. And if that can be done by cutting back on other conditions and benefits, then I think generally it will get support.
Well, I suspect it won't go down necessarily that well, but if you look at the private sector perspective from this, that's exactly what's happened. We've had pay freezes, pay cuts, pension changes, and I think most people do accept there is a preference to hold on to jobs and to actually reduce terms and conditions accordingly. And I think that is definitely an option that is worth considering, particularly when you look at the number of public sector workers in certain communities and the impact that would have on the community in the event of job losses.